Caribbean Vibrations, TV's #1 Caribbean show. We always show you the sun. Today we're showing you the cold. As we come to you from Ottawa, here's what's coming up on this week's show. As part of Black History Month, we thought it'd be best to recap some scenes of trailblazers who create Black history every day of the year. But first up, Sir Hilary Beckles teaches us the true roots of democracy, right now on Caribbean Vibrations.
One of the important things I think that has not been fully understood has been the making of the contributions of African people to the making of the Americas. The view has always been that 15 million Africans were brought to the Caribbean, Brazil, North America, and it was really a migration of labor. But it was much more than that. Africans brought to the Caribbean, to the Americas, they brought their technology, they brought their science, they brought their philosophies, their art, their religion, their pharmacology. They brought an entire economic and social civilization to this part of the world that has continued to shape it, so that when we speak, for example, today about democracy and so on, we were the ones who actually developed that philosophy, because we were saying there has to be liberty, there has to be freedom, we will fight for it, we will not accept enslavement, we want justice. All the things that we now take for granted as part of democracy, we were the ones who actually went out and demanded those things every single day for 400 years. Tremendous intellectual capacity in the Caribbean. What we have always lacked are the economic resources. And bear in mind that these nations are young, in most instances 40, 50 years. And we have crafted out of that horrible colonial history, we have built nations out of them, and the nations are young. But guess what? They are stable, they are viable, they are multi-ethnic, multicultural. There's a strong civilization, and the young people in the region, I think, have intellectual dynamism, and every chance they have to participate, whether it's sport, it's art, it's music, it's medicine, it's history, it's theater, whatever we have an opportunity, we do well. So education for us is about giving the opportunity to all Caribbean citizens to explore their imaginations.
You're watching Caribbean Vibrations, and we're here at the Ontario Black History Society annual brunch with the Honourable Senator Ann Cools. How are you doing today?
I am very well indeed, and very happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here. When we were talking off camera about the need for something like the Black History Society, why is that important?
Well, I think, number one, there's a need for historical societies in general. I think that they perform a fantastic and a wonderful social function, which is to inform themselves of the past. I happen to believe that one can't discover the future and go into the future without having known the past. So I am here largely because, one, I know of the work of the society, but largely because they invited me to come. So an invitation is always a good reason to be at an event. And I am informed that they're presenting me with an award, which is a very nice and a very pleasant thing. But the real reason I'm here, obviously, at the end of the day, is because I am the very first Black senator in Canada and the very first female Black senator in all of North America. And I think after 30 years in the Senate, I am beginning to understand the profundity of that and what it means, because I crisscross this country speaking here and there and everywhere on many, many issues. And for example, I have learned that in the United States of America, a Black senator is a very rare thing. And here I am, well known to most Canadians, I think. And I think I've given a good account of myself on the floor of the House. So I'm here largely because it's Black History Month. It's a time when Black people, as Canadians, take a look at their own history. But more important like that, I think it's a time when Black Canadians also claim all of Canadian history as their own, because at the end of the day, all history is ours. And I make it my business when I speak to young people to always say, this is Canada, this is your land, make it yours, make its history yours, because your history is a part of it as well. So this is my own private view. And history is very important. And I'm a voracious reader and a student of history, because not to know the past is to repeat it.
You're watching Caribbean Vibrations. Give us a call at 416-451-8596 or email us at caribbeanvibrationstv@gmail.com.
Caribbean Vibration.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Caribvibetv.
Caribbean Vibration.
Well, talking about activism, there's a great series of short films that we're going to be screening, courtesy of the Akua Benjamin Legacy Project. It's 50 years of Black activism in Toronto, and it's wonderful. It's executive produced by Alison Duke, who's an established Black filmmaker in Toronto, and directed by 5 extraordinary new up-and-coming Black women directors based here in Toronto. And it profiles people like Dudley Laws, Marlene Green, who is an educator, Leonard and Gwendolyn Johnson, who founded the Third World Book Shop on Bathurst. We have Charles Roach, the lawyer, renowned, that we all know so well. We have Rosie Douglas, who was the subject of the feature film that was made last year about the activism at McGill University last year. But that action that he led at McGill really triggered a lot of movement, both in North America and the region. It was the trigger for the Black Power movement in Trinidad, for example.
We have to prepare ourselves to use any means necessary to seek our liberation from white domination.
Memories are easily swallowed by the passing of time. Great spirits become forgotten ghosts. New generations mourn the lack of leadership, as if Canada had no worthy Black heroes. Rosie Douglas was our fearless rebel.
When I think of Roosevelt Douglas, I think of an analogy, a wheel with spokes and with Rosie sort of at the hub.
Rosie emerged as one of those leaders, if you will, who was not shy or unwilling to take on the Canadian government and the Canadian state.
He said, our struggle is to make the lives of ordinary people better and valued.
He was part of blazing the trail and linking for us a worldwide Black Pan-African movement.
To tell the story of new immigrants in new lands is to remember a frightening feeling of being trapped in an old world that's washed away, and a new world that hesitates to welcome you. To fight or not to fight? What do you accept, and at what point do you rebel?
Dudley Laws. He had a very commanding and compelling presence. He would not just speak with vigor, but he would speak from that emotive standpoint where people could really understand, feel what he was saying.
One cannot be totally satisfied until you see changes on the streets, changes within the courts, changes in institutions.
And he was able to speak with urgency, he was able to speak with clarity about what should be done. Hence the reason why he became appointed the spokesperson and the face of the Black Action Defense Committee.
The white peoples who live mostly in the colder countries have had to think and to work hard to find better ways to get food, clothing, and shelter, and to do many, many other things which the Negro does not know about at all. That these two African Canadians born in this country would have a flock of people from the rest of the world, the Caribbean and Africa, Latin America, come in there, and they actually become our grandparents, our parents, our source of inspiration, our source of soothing, our source of politics, and a way for us to see the world. That doesn't go away.
She saw Black young people who were being discriminated, who were being picked up by the police, who were just not doing well in school, who had no options open to them. All of those things she saw, and she said, you know, this has got to change.
Marlene opened my mind to sort of viewing people as one and not having this limitation on class.
She had a wild sense of humor in terms of her sort of thinking around things and talking about it. She was very, very clear especially when it comes to the fact that we had to stand up and fight back.
He's been a mentor for me and for hundreds of other young black lawyers.
He built community through his work.
He was a father, he was a husband, he was a loving person. He was a true black activist.
The very first association of black lawyers. He was Caribbena's first chair.
He was so many things to so many people. A mentor, an advocate, and a friend. But to many of us, he was just Charlie.
My conscience said to me, you gotta stand up in the spirit of Martin Luther King. You gotta stand up in the spirit of Sister Rosa Parks. You can't bow down. You gotta emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
The importance of the festival is that you have to know where you came from in order to know where you're going. Miss Lou said that. And that's what we get from these films. You get history, you get heroes, you get fantasy, you get all these stories that come from the imaginations of Caribbean people that tell our story in our words, our sounds, our languages, our images, our pictures, our locations. And it really builds confidence, particularly among young people today. They need that, to see that strength.
You're watching Caribbean Vibrations, and we are here at the 7th Annual University of Toronto Alumni Gala with Dr. Shirley Thompson. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Great to be here. My first time in Toronto.
Came across the pond.
Oh, love it. Yes, across the pond. Via Jamaica.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. And like, quick little stop in.
Yes, I spent the weekend with my parents for Easter.
Now, we were talking a little bit off camera about all the different things you've done as I'm learning more and more these amazing things you've done. Tell us about New Nation Rising.
Well, I was commissioned to write a big piece for the Queen of England's 50th anniversary, so the Golden Jubilee. I was asked to write a piece for London, and I decided to write a symphony which tells the story of London through music and the history of London from 1066 to the present day.
Where did you get that inspiration to actually do the piece? Because I know it was for a certain event, but I can't even fathom how much work goes into that. So where'd you get that inspiration?
Well, I started off with a blank page, as you say. And because I have an interest in history, a very strong interest, I taught modern history at European History University. So I was inspired to look into ideas around historical ideas, and I tend to draw my inspiration from history, and so I decided to create a story around the London because it was about the Queen and her legacy and the legacy of London and its heritage.
And you've composed a lot of different works. What's next? What's the next big thing for you?
Well, I'm writing a series of operas about Caribbean heroines. I've written an opera about Queen Anne of the Maroons that was premiered at the contemporary festival called Tête-à-Tête last year in Europe. And it opened the whole festival. I've written a piece called The Woman Who Refused to Dance. It's about a woman, an enslaved woman on a slave ship who refused to dance and was whipped, and then she died a few days later, and this was the catalyst for the act of the abolition of the trade in enslaved African people. It was based on this it was based on this incident when William Wilberforce argued at Parliament using this as a test case. And I'm also, one of the female icons I'm looking at is Dido Elizabeth Bell, who was perceived to be the first black aristocrat in England in the 18th century.
Some very heavy, powerful stuff.
That's what I'm interested in, telling stories.
You're watching Caribbean Vibrations TV, and we're here at the 7th Annual University of West Indies Toronto Alumni Gala with one of the winners tonight. How you doing, Wes?
I'm just fine, thank you.
Okay. Now, for those who don't know, you have a company called Kingsdale Shareholders. What is a proxy specialist?
Well, the proxy specialist is, I prefer to use the term advisor.
Okay.
So if you're a publicly traded company and I own an investment in your company and I don't like the way that it's managed, I can either sell my stock or I can get the rest of the shareholders together and get rid of you as management and put my own people in place. So my job is to help people do that. Or in some cases to help companies defend them against people doing that. So that's called shareholder activism, right? So nowadays it's really an asset class. People have billions of dollars to spend, and they look at underperforming companies and try to take advantage of that by going in and cleaning management out, putting their own team in place, and then lift the performance of the company up. So my job is to really help these guys look at the company, look at strategy to get a win, and hopefully create value for shareholders.
Why did you start your company?
I've always wanted to do something on my own. I didn't know what it was, and then I got an opportunity in this industry. I worked there for a number of years, and I decided, listen, I can professionalize it. It was very fragmented. The way that they did things weren't very professional, professionalized in Canada, and I thought that I could do better. So in 2003, I decided to start my own firm. I went to my colleagues at the time, and nobody would come with me because they thought that I would go out of business in the first 6 months. And here we are 13 years later, and we're the number one brand in Canada with 90% of market share in this market.
That's a powerful thing. You know what I mean? You started, you walked out the door, and we've seen that actually in some movies where, you know, one or two people will go with them, and then they reap the rewards later on. Now, we spoke a bit about your upbringing off camera. You're actually from Jamaica, from a large family. How did that impact you going in on this dream?
I was raised by my grandmother, Julia Vassal, an amazing, amazing woman. And I have 13 brothers and sisters. I have a brother who was murdered here in Canada, actually in Buffalo, because he was into not so good things. And but my grandmother taught me from I was a young boy to work hard and never take life for granted. You know, so I really emulate her in everything I do. So when I get up in the morning at very early times, like 5 o'clock in the morning, like she used to, I try to do my exercise to keep healthy, and then I hit the books. When I was younger, to study. Now I go to work, and I work long hours, but I also have a family. I have 5 children, so I tend to try to balance my life out a little bit. It's not all about work, but there's some play in there because you do have to do that for the kids.
Now, you're in the world of finance and stocks and all these things, but one of the things, unfortunately, in our community is that we don't talk about that enough, about investment and all these things. How do you think we can change that?
Well, you know, it's interesting because if you go to Bay Street, you're going to see that there's a lot of people of color on Bay Street. There's a lot of Jamaicans on Bay Street. Unfortunately, we don't see them. Unfortunately, we're overshadowed by all the bad news that we see by people who are here doing no good. But there are a lot of people doing really great work on Bay Street. In terms of investment, yeah, as a culture, we don't really think about that. You know, the typical investment that we do, we call it partnering. I don't know if you remember that. Partner draw, yeah. Right? You put some money in. It's almost like a pyramid scheme. You put some money in. Sometimes somebody, in the end, they didn't put their money in, and then you're out. That's the kind of way that we save in the Caribbean. Or we put the money in the bank account, earning 0 interest. In fact, we're actually paying the bank to put the money in the bank. We don't really look at the stock markets. We tend to think that it's for sophisticated people, but it's really not. It's for the average Joe. All you have to do is just look at the financial statement. Does this company make money? Did they lose money? If they lose money, I won't invest in it. If they make money, maybe I'll buy their stock. And if I don't really like what I see or what I'm hearing, I sell it and I move on and buy something else that's better. And I also buy something, maybe a yield in something, maybe a dividend every quarter. So at least every quarter I get some money in my bank account. And so if we start to think along those lines, we can create a nice little nest egg for ourselves. When we retire, at least we have something in the bank to make sure it carries us through retirement.
Inspiration for my art really comes from my own experiences growing up in secondary school and within the educational system where the images of black people were not readily available. So for me, it's almost like I graduated from high school in spite of the school system rather than because of it, because at every turn, like, my self-esteem was suddenly under attack with not having teachers that looked like me, or in the school itself, the walls didn't reflect who I was. It almost my presence was absent on the walls when I seen the principals from 1945 onward. Like, they were all of a different complexion. So it said the subtle message to me that people like you have never been in control of the school, not now, not before, and not in the future. Just because of those innocent pictures on the wall, that they probably didn't notice that was the message that would be given, but that was a subtle message that was given nonetheless.
You're watching Caribbean Vibrations, and we're here at the 2016 edition of the Harry Jerome Awards. My good friend Selena, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Now, I've been watching your career, MP from the Whitby area. You're also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Yes, absolutely. It's been wonderful.
Now, two questions I have to ask you. Of course, who are you wearing?
I am wearing Indy Antoine Charles, Strut Caribbean in Brampton. Wonderful designer from Grenada.
Grenada Posse, Spice Massive.
Hashtag 473, big up.
Okay. Now, the next question I have to ask you is, you got to do something that a lot of people haven't got a chance to and would love to.
Yes.
Is you met Obama. So tell us about that experience.
Oh my God. So I've been wanting to meet President Obama for 8 years. And every time I tried to say, in the mirror, I'd practice, hello, President Obama, I would cry. And that day was powerful. I had Justin Trudeau on one side, President Obama on the other side, and we just had a little bit of a conversation. And the most powerful moments of my career ever. It was amazing.
Now I'm going to go back real political for a second.
Yes.
Why does our audience need to really understand that voting is important?
Because we have a power in vote, but it's not just voting. It is strategically voting. So the community really needs to get together. We are changing our procurement process in the federal government to invite more small and medium-sized enterprises in to get business with our government. That is something that the Black community needs to know. We have doubled the amount of tuition grants for low to middle income students to get access to education. That disproportionately affects our community. That you need to know. So we need to be able to strategically be voting and saying, you know what, by 2019, the Black community should be able to say, Selena, this is what we want. We want better trade, better access to health care, a change in our judicial system, whatever that is, it needs to come from the community and it needs to advocate. We need to advocate and we vote for the party that gives us what we want. Plain and simple.
I like that. Short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Here with Selena, and you're watching Caribbean Vibrations TV. I hope you all enjoyed this week's edition of Caribbean Vibrations, coming to you from the nation's capital. Don't forget to check us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Check out CaribbeanVibrationsTV.com, and we'll see you next time on Caribbean Vibrations. Come make we blaze the fire, right? It's cold, boy, real cold.